or the comment. That's what I meant to say. Paulino Brenner, good to have you back on the show. I always like when you visit. You're very helpful. I always appreciate that. And guys, remember, post your questions on the event page. Otherwise, we're going to have a very short episode. Last week, we had a really long episode. It was like an hour and 45 minutes. He says, Paulino Brenner says, what's the best way to optimize a computer for doing Hangouts on airs? # Greg Meetings. If you answered this last Monday, please skip. I did not answer this last Monday. I did kind of. And I wasn't exactly thorough with my answer, and I'd like to be a little more thorough this time around. If you are planning on doing Hangouts on air, there's 2 requirements you need. Hardware requirements and software requirements. The hardware requirements are a little more difficult and a little more expensive if you want to do the full 720p or 1080p HD. The download and upload requirements are a little less rigorous, and if you Google Hangout on air system requirements, there's something about this that drives me crazy because Google throws this out here and I'm like, that's just not very practical. If I scroll down to their bandwidth, which is your internet connection, what kind of internet connection you need, they say minimum bandwidth required is outbound 256 kbps, inbound 512 kbps. Yes, this is minimum, but you do realize you can broadcast a Hangout on air on 240p, which is worse than like old standard definition television. Yeah, you'll be able to get away with doing a Hangout, but I probably wouldn't do a Hangout on air like that because you are going to be really jumbly and ugly and hideous and all that. I would rather be ugly in HD than ugly in standard def. You know, that's just me. So when it comes to the bandwidth requirements, I recommend having what they say is the ideal bandwidth requirements for the best experience, and I recommend this at least. Your outbound or your upstream needs to be 1 megabit per second, and your inbound or downstream needs to be 2.5 megabits per second. This is a little bit, it's like your mid-grade cable service, no, your mid-grade satellite service plan, typically. If you want to test your speed, see how fast it is, go to a website called speedtest.net, completely free. It's a third-party service, and you can actually run a speed test just by clicking Begin Test right on their site, and it'll tell you what your upstream and downstream is. That's the first requirement for your Hangouts on air. Second requirement is hardware requirements, and that gets a little more expensive because they recommend, again, this kind of drives me nuts, your minimum requirements for your processors, any 2 gigahertz dual-core processor or greater. If you are using a 2 gigahertz dual-core processor, you are not going to get full HD. You'll probably get 480p. That's probably the maximum you're going to get out of your system. That's standard television resolution, right? So if you want your HD, you have to bump up to a quad-core of some kind processor. Whether it's AMD or Intel, I don't care. I recommend using a Core i5 or a Core i7 processor to get the full HD kick out of your system. Now, I did have a number of recommended systems I had emailed people. If you guys want that list, you can email me, Craig at CraigTheTechTeacher.com. I've been kind of recommending some systems for some people because as a third hardware kind of thing I'm just going to throw in there, I'm not a big fan when you're doing video of getting an integrated graphics card. So these Intel HD integrated, these Radeon HD integrated graphics, I'm not a big fan of those if you're doing video. I recommend you having some kind of a dedicated graphics card. Doesn't have to be anything like high-end for gaming, but dedicated graphics are always better off when you're doing video rendering and editing and things like that. It's just a strong recommendation. And of course, lastly, we'll talk about memory. You should probably have at least 3 to 4 gigabytes of memory because most of you are probably running Windows 7 or Windows 8, and I actually recommend that as a minimum right now for that. Yeah, and I'm just throwing out all kinds of numbers here, so if you guys want to come back and watch this video later, you can. All these videos are cut up and uploaded to YouTube in full HD, and the full episode of this show will actually be in full HD on the YouTube channel within a couple hours after the broadcast ends. So, excellent question, Paulino Brenner. Like I said, I wasn't thorough enough, and I feel like I was a little more thorough on this one. So, thank you for the opportunity to make that video a little better. Appreciate that.